Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to start this off by all of us having a nice sip of water. Water is really great.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, our bodies, we really need water, don't we? So, what is this water crisis that China is facing?
So it's a big one, and it's been brewing for a long time.
Brewing?
The thing is, water is needed for a surprising and bewildering array of human activities, not all of which are readily apparent. But for
Slip and slides?
Slip and slides, yes. Well, those I think are some of the more obvious ones. I'm personally always spend my time on a slip and slide when I can. But the manufacturing and power sectors are huge consumers. Agriculture is a huge consumer. And all these problems worldwide are really being exacerbated by climate-related changes that we're seeing. And so all of those have been building up, and it's getting dire in certain parts of the world, and China is among those that's most at risk.
Can you give us an idea of where the situation is now? Like, people still have water to drink, right? How bad is it?
So there is water to drink, and the thing is that water for home consumption is actually not one of the largest sources of consumption in China, or frankly in most places. In China, 60% of the water consumption is used by the industrial sector, and agriculture is also a really big consumer. So in local areas, where you may have shortages, we in the U.S. occasionally encounter these where you're asked, particularly out west, you're asked to take shorter showers or not water your lawn and things like that. That's when things get really extreme, usually for a short period of time. But that's not really where the main draws on the water demand are, right? And so you have a place like China that's such a huge industrial economy, and it really has taken this water use for granted in how it's constructed its economy. And when you combine that with the sheer number of people in China and the size of the economy, there's actually less fresh water per capita in China than in even some of the most arid regions of the world, which is pretty astonishing. And by UN definitions, China is actually facing acute water shortages by that per capita metric.
So, you talk about industry, right? So, like, let's say you're manufacturing, I don't know, a slip and slide. How does water, I'm just not picturing water being used in this machinery to make slip and slides or microchips or whatever it is.
Sure. So, look, I'm not an engineer, nor necessarily an expert in the finer points of manufacturing. So this is a little out of my sweet spot, but there are some types of uses for water. One is simply as an input for raw materials, right? And so you have things like grain for food, you have cotton for textiles, you have other kinds of metals and construction materials. Almost anything you can think of that's used to make stuff tends to require a lot of water in that initial production or refinement. So that's a big one. You also have many manufacturing processes themselves that require water. And that really just is very specific to a given industry. But water is very commonly used for cooling. It's used for washing. It's used for purifying or filtering. And so there are all kinds of different functions in a wide range of manufacturing facilities that are extremely highly dependent on water. Even though, how you manufacture slip and slide, I couldn't tell you. I don't know exactly what the water demand of that slide is. But certainly the stuff that's going into it is requiring a lot of water.
So how did China get to this situation where it has less water per capita than like desert countries? Was it like a drought? Was it bad government policy? Was it a government caused drought?
So I'd say it's a bit of all of the above, right? I think that so going back to the statistic that I mentioned, that 65% of China's water use is from industry, right?
Does that
Um,
include agriculture, or is agriculture on?
no, it does not include agriculture. So agriculture is separate, and on top of that, in places like the U.S., where you have entire states in the Great Plains that are primarily uh, centered around the industrial agricultural economy. That may be the biggest draw on water demand, such as in the Oklahoma.
Yeah, and the good news is that our manufacturing in this country has been hollowed out and sent to China, so we don't have to worry about that problem.
That is true. That is true. And even still, even at our height of manufacturing in the U.S., I don't think we were ever quite the world's manufacturing hub to the degree that China is. Even in the mid 20th century, there was a more, I think, diversified economy, whereas China not only has this comparative advantage that it's developed, but it's also a product of government policy, right? That it has invested in infrastructure and manufacturing capability rather than in the consumer economy, right? And there are a number of reasons for that, those sort of political economic realities. But the fact remains that the economy is heavily built around manufacturing capability and industry. What that means is that is so dominant that it has, in recent decades, dramatically increased the demand for those freshwater resources. Now, you put that on top of the fact that particularly the northern China plain is a fairly arid region and has limited natural rainfall and freshwater sources from rivers and lakes. And you have the fact that China is home to a huge number of people. So simply any per capita metric is a reflection of that, really big denominator. So what that means is you have these various different stresses, right, and pressures, and that has really been accelerated by the industrial policy of China, the real expansion of the economy very rapidly, and other factors like climate change. So it's kind of a perfect storm.
When you talk about water being used for manufacturing, after that water goes into manufacturing, can it be recycled? Can it be renewed? Or is it kind of like is there a way to recover some of that?
It depends on the use, right? Where water is used for cooling and there's no degrading of the quality of water, it simply needs to, come back to normal ambient temperature after its use. It very much can be reused, and that can be something for which plants are designed. Most plants are not designed that way because they were built for a world of ample water, where you're not kind of optimizing for scarcity, right? You're optimizing for price and performance efficiency, right? So that's really something that is a problem all over the world and needs to change, right? But in some cases, you can reuse the water, but you'd have to retrofit your facilities to do so. And in other places, the water is actually degraded, right? It's polluted, it's salinated, it's somehow less pure or fit for use after it has gone through its process, right? Imagine using for mining, right? Or for washing coal or something like that. The water's really dirty when it's done. And sometimes that it can be then cleaned and purified through water treatment, though that itself is expensive and energy intensive. Most often, you use some basic pollution remediation methods, and then it is allowed to drain off into the nearest body of water, right? And that's by design. So that is something that fundamentally doesn't really account for the scarcity that China and many other places are now experiencing.
Yeah, I don't really have a sense of China being a place that's really
About water reuse?
water reuse, recycling, cutting back on pollution. So are they basically not taking these steps?
Well, to transform a large industrial facility, let alone an entire economy, right, around new principles of water preservation and conservation isn't something that happens overnight. So in some cases, it's happening. I think there has not really been a concerted national push for water conservation, in part because it's the kind of out of sight, out of mind problem that has driven a lot of natural resource challenges. And, it's just something that human society is not very good at, right? Without picking on the Chinese, there, not many societies that do manage their water demand very well, frankly. And places that have water scarcity are reaching up, bumping up against these natural limits first, right? Some places like Israel have, for many decades, or practically all of its existence, have been building an industrial economy in an environment of acute water scarcity. Places like that had to optimize for water scarcity from day one have done better. Most places in the world are not in that category, and they are having to relearn how to function, to build their economy in a way that is really dealing with this constraint.